Good morning once again, my dear students. So we'll continue with my video lecture on writing the thesis manuscript. Now, we have already discussed chapter 1, the problem and its background, chapter 2, the review of related literature and studies, chapter 3, the methodology, and now we are going to discuss chapter 4, which is the chapter that presents the results of your study. Now, what are the contents of chapter 4? Of course, the organized data that you have gathered, and the presentation can be in the form of tables, maps, or graphs, or pictures. And then, after presenting the data, you are going to interpret the data and make an analysis of the implications of the data presented. So it is not just enough that you present the data that you have gathered, but you are going to interpret what the data means, or what are the implications of the data that you have presented. Now, in the presentation of results, it should follow the chronology of the objectives of the study, so that if you have objective number 1, first in chapter 4 should be the objective number 1, and then followed by objective number 2, and so on. Now, in the presentation, the results should logically answer the objectives of the study. So, by presenting in chapter 4, you are already answering the objectives of your study. Okay, let us take some examples in the presentation of data. So we have here a table. How are we going to present this? First, you have the table title, which should be above the table. And then you are going to present what is in the table. For example, table 1 presents the kind and amount of waste generated by the different waste sources in the study area. It shows that compostable, recyclable, etc. So you are going to present what is in the table. It's not just enough that you just put there the table and wala na. And then discuss what the data means, what is or what are its implications. Now, in the discussion, you can compare or contrast the results of your study to your reviewed related studies. So now you will see the importance of the related literature and studies, because you are going to make reference to those reviewed studies to your current study. You can compare that the result is similar to the study conducted by whom, or the result of your study is in contrast to the study conducted by author B. And then you have to make a concluding statement about the data presented. So what does this data is all about? You make a concluding statement, a very brief. And then, as much as possible, in terms of the technical presentation, present the table in portrait layout with at least 10-point font size. Now, there are large tables which may not fit in the paper of the manuscript, so that it can be presented in landscape layout if the table is wide. Or if the table is long and could not fit in a page, it can be cut and continued in the next page. But in the continuation, we are going to put there table 1 continued, for example, and then retain the table heading. Retain the table heading. So you will notice that in the previous slide, the compostables have the details. Now, you can also retain some features that will give continuity to the data being presented. So dito, in here, the details in the compostables are not anymore presented, but only the subtotal, also with the recyclables. Because this is a continuation of table 1, which did not fit in a page, so you continued the table in the next page. But then in the ensuing entries, you have there the details of what has not been presented in the previous page. Okay, so there are instances wherein the table, if these are long, if the table is long and could not fit in the page, it's not enough that you just cut or you just continue with the table without any, kasi in this case you do not know anymore what this column is about. Okay, sorry. So you do not know anymore what this column is about, what is this, if you do not have the table heading, so this column, if you have the table heading, you will see that this column is with a residential product of generated by households. This column here is generated by the market, and so on. See? So hindi yan pwede. Okay. Now, in the presentation of data in the form of graph, so we have here an example of a graph. Now, the figure title is below the graph, below the graph, in a form of a caption. Again, the same with the table. Similar with the table, you are going to present what is in the graph. For example, figure 1 illustrates the percentage contribution of the different sectors in waste generation. So it shows, then discuss, present what is in the graph. And again, discuss what your data means, or what are its implications. Also, you can compare or contrast the results of your study to your reviewed related studies. So again, it is not enough that you present your data, enumerate that this is 59% something, but what does your data mean? You make a concluding statement about the data presented. Okay. So, what are the common methods of organization? Whether this is true to all the chapters in the manuscript. So, the presentation could be chronological, starting at the beginning and going to the end, or it could be logical, dividing a subject into analytical blocks, like for example what we have just what I have just discussed, that there has to be a logical presentation based on the objectives of your study. Or the discussion could present the cause and effect. Cause and effect. So for example, in the waste generation, there is so much generation in households. Why? So discuss the reasons for doing something and then show the results. Or, as I have stated earlier, the presentation could be in comparison and contrast, showing how two or more related things are similar or different. Now, let us take some examples. Okay. We have here an edited, sorry. This is not yet edited thesis manuscript. This was submitted to me for correction. This introductory statement is not necessary, because what you are doing is already that. You are presenting the findings of the study based on the gathered data. So there is no more need for that statement. Okay. So in this presentation, nilagyan na ng numbering, which is part of the objectives of your of the study. So activities and practices that violate environmental laws in particular areas. Okay. So here the background is presented, what table 1.1 is all about, and then brief discussion what the environmental law is about. Okay. So here, notice that table 1.1 is very long, no? And parang 1.5 ang spaces niya. So, in the table title, pwede siyang single space. Ano? Lagay natin single space. Okay. Then, you make a single space between the table title and the start of the paragraph. Normally, what we do with the table title is that nakahanging indent siya. Ano? Okay, hanging indent siya. Now, since this is very parang only the heading of the table is now in the page, pwede mo siyang, you can put that in the next page. Now, since this is very long and there is still space, you can have that in single space. Sorry. We can have this in single space, and the font size into 10. And then, since the start of the table in this page is very minimal, you can have this in the next page. No? You can have that in the next page. Now, there's still long. So what you will do is to copy the whole table. Copy the whole table. Tapos, paste. Now I am demonstrating to you how to retain the title of the table. How to retain the title of the table. So, na-copy paste na natin ang whole table from here kasi kumbaga konti na lang, one line lang number 7. So, we can cut this table. Delete rows. Okay. What happened? Nagduro-diretso. Sorry. So, yan. Dito na. So, 6 lang. Number 6. So, dito, since this is the continuation of table 1.1, lagyan natin table 1.1 continue. Since andoon na ang numbers 1 to 6, ito naman ngayon ang i-delete natin. delete rows. Yan. So, the continuation will start with number 7, no? And so on, and so on. So, we can cut here. Delete rows. Okay. And so on. Ganun lang. You have to copy the whole table and then cut what has already been, delete what has already been presented in previous page, and then continue. Tapos hanggang dito, cut again, and then continue to the next page. Then after the table, of course, is the discussion. Continued ang discussion. So, the same din yan. Now, let us take another example of already checked manuscript. Okay. The objective of the study is to determine the demographic profile of the respondents. That's part of the objectives of this study. So, what is presented first, you will notice na wala na siyang number. What is presented first is the demographic profile of the respondents. So, each profile is presented in a table. After presenting the table, you have here the discussion. Table 1 shows the frequency and percentage distribution of the respondents. Now, usually kapag percentage, 2 digits parati yan, no? 2 digits parati yan. Hindi pwede yung 42.2 lang kasi we're talking of percentage. So, ito, what is in the table is narrated here, like that. And then, there is a concluding statement at the end. Based on the result, where majority of the respondents are within the age bracket of 20 to 30 years old, this implies that many of the respondents are still young. That is how to analyze and discuss the implication of the data presented. So, the same here for sex. So, you have here the narration of what is in the table, and then narration of what is in the table, and then the concluding statement, which is compared to the national statistics wherein female are more than the male in a particular population. Same is true here, educational statement. You have here the presentation or narration of the data, and then the implication of the data. The data implies that majority of the respondents had relatively low level of education. Low level kasi ang pinaka mataas na frequency ay dito, more than half of the respondents. Yan. So, implication lang. It doesn't mean that it is the exact condition, but you are only discussing the implication of your data, gathered data. Okay. I hope that is enough as an example. Okay. So, in the same manner, graphs, for example, are okay. So, here is a presentation of the map. Again, if it is a map, it is referred to as figure, and the title of the table, the graph is below the picture or below the illustration. Okay, thank you. I hope we have discuss the how to present our chapter 4. Next will be the presentation of chapter 5. Okay, thank you for listening. I hope you are able to gather important information and knowledge in my presentation. Good morning once again.